Not only did I lose the person that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, I also lost my family. And I just felt so like alone.
Welcome to part 2 of our Jai Friday divorce series. This week, I'm going to be speaking to Christina about her personal story. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Christina, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being so open and willing to talk about such a personal journey, especially because our community isn't necessarily so open and willing to even think about it as an option. So thank you, and I appreciate every minute that I have with you today.
Oh, thanks, Swasti. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you about it.
How long were you married for?
I was married for about 2 years.
You were married for 2 years, okay.
Mhm.
And then how did this marriage come about?
I met him in college when I was 18. I went to Davis, so we had this co-ed South Asian fraternity that he was actually a founder of, and that's how we met. So he had already graduated by then, but he was like his friends still went to Davis and were still in the organization. So he would come back and we would just kind of casually hang out, and we just kind of became really good friends like over that time. And then I graduated from Davis. I ended up moving out to the city and we started hanging out more, and then we started dating, and then we got married.
How did you feel going into this marriage? Did you have any red flags or any concerns?
Totally. There were a ton of red flags. I guess I'm just gonna say that like up front. So I guess like when we were hanging out, when, we're both adults, we're both working and everything, we were going out a lot and partying, which we did like back when I was in Davis too. So it didn't seem odd or anything. I was like, this is like what we've always done. But he had been married once before. And he was married during the 2008 housing crisis, and he owns hotels. So he suffered a lot financially. So he had gone through that. He'd gone through his own divorce. So he was in his own funk really around that time. So then I moved to the city, catching him kind of in that funk. But I think he's still the same guy that I knew when I was in college. So we're hanging out, we're going out, we're drinking, partying. And over time, I'm like, I think he might like have a problem maybe, because like if he drank a little too much, then he would start getting really belligerent. He would start being a jerk to people and being a jerk to me. So I thought it was weird, but I feel like I almost like still looked at him through these like rose colored glasses that, he's the guy that I knew when I was 18 and I met him and he was super funny and we would be able to talk for hours and hours on end. So that was like ingrained in my mind. Like I couldn't look at him any differently, even though it was all right in front of me, He struggled with that. And then we got engaged, and maybe like a month after we got engaged, he got arrested for his second DUI. Right. And then I think we realized that, okay, I think he's got like a problem. And then an added layer of complexity. So in the Indian culture, like we don't believe in alcoholism, like that's not a thing. Like, especially you go to some parts of India, like people are crazy drinkers. Like it's such a big part of like our culture too. So it's like, you have a problem, what are you talking about? Like just stop drinking. Like they think it's like that easy. Like if you have a problem, just don't do it. Right. But that ties into mental health and that whole piece where, South Asians, again, they're like, that's not a thing, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. What is therapy? Like, what is that?
Exactly. You need a therapist? Like, what are you like breaking down, like breaking apart? Right. They don't believe in any of that. So while we were engaged, he decided that he wanted to go to rehab, and his whole family was not about it. He didn't even tell, I think his parents knew and maybe one or two of his cousins, but he didn't tell everybody just because he knew that he was going to get shitted on for it. Like they're all going to give me and they're all going to be like, well, what do you need to go to rehab for? You're some kind of loser. He just didn't want to have to deal with that. Now that I'm like reflecting back and looking at that, I'm like, gosh, he was going through all this stuff on his own, mentally and emotionally. And then there's like our relationship on top of that, which is like also like kind of suffering from everything that he's going through. But maybe like a few months before we got married, he had finished his rehab. He was sober and it looked like he was on the right path. Back then I was like 27, 28, and I was like so immature too. I didn't understand like the magnitude of what he was going through, just like his divorce, his drinking, and the pressures that he was getting from his family, like not just like on what he should do with his life, but on like how he's currently living his life with like his drinking habits and all that stuff. So we get married. We're having a lot of problems just because like a lot of it came from his drinking, because if he wasn't drinking, he was a totally like normal person. But as soon as he started drinking, then it was like he just became this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of person. Yeah. But we got married and there was something in me that was like, I think we can still make this work because we really love each other. And I think we can figure out how to make this work. So we got married, and his family, like, because he was Gujarati and I'm South Indian, I think were like intimidated by the fact that I wasn't also like in the hotels, that I was doing something totally different. Like I was working for Google back then. They were like, oh, well, what, she thinks she's better than us or something, you know? And I'm also not Gujarati. So like, that's like a double whammy. I'm super, super different from them. So I never really gained their approval. But I think my ex knew that too, that, okay, like they don't really like her. So he's like struggling with all the shit that he's going through, and then what his family thinks of me. And it was just like a lot to deal with. We still tried to make it work. We would like go on trips together, and we would try, like when we weren't fighting, we like went to therapy. We did like everything. And then towards the end, I think he realized that like not drinking was just not possible for him, just because his whole family is like family full of drinkers.
Okay.
You go to a function and you're not drinking, it's like, are you pregnant or are you sick? Like, if you're not one of those things, you should be drinking. And if you're not, then you think you're better than everyone, or there's something wrong with you if you decide that you don't want to drink. So then towards the end of our relationship, he was like, I think I'm good. I want to start drinking again. And I wasn't going to be like, no, you can't. I was like, you think that that's the right decision, then you go ahead and do it. Okay. And so he did. And then like, it was just like spiraling out of control. Like I would be at work and then he'd be at work, and he would always do it like while he was working. So then I'm not around to like be like, hey, like put that bottle down. Like he's doing it when he's by himself and there's nobody watching him. So then by the time I get home from work, then he's tossed and he's like starting something, and then the next day he would feel bad about it, and then the whole thing would happen again. So it was like this nonstop cycle, and I was starting to go insane. I was like, dude, like this is insanity. I can't keep doing this to myself. Like I'm going to work exhausted because I was up all night with you, like engaging in this stupid conflict, and it was just getting exhausting. So by the middle of 2017, it was my 30th birthday. Okay. I went down to Puerto Vallarta with a girlfriend because he didn't want to go with me. He was like, I'm too busy. I just don't want to go. I was like, all right, that's cool. I don't care. So we get there, and then he's calling me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, he's trying to wish me happy birthday or whatever. And he instead was making me feel bad about taking a trip without him. And then I hung up the phone, and like when I hung up the phone, in my mind, I was like, I'm done. Like, I just can't do this anymore. Like whatever he's going through, like he's gonna have to like deal with it on his own, because I've tried to help him in like as many ways as I can. And now like I'm physically exhausted, I'm drained, I'm mentally drained. Like I'm not taking care of myself anymore because like all of my time and energy is going into trying to make this relationship work. So I was just clocked out, done. I'm not doing this anymore. So I came back to the States. I like kind of took my time because I was like, I want to make sure that like, I'm not going to like come back in 6 months and be like, actually, let's try it again. I wanted to make sure this is like absolutely what I want to do. Yeah. So I gave myself a few weeks and I was like, this is what I want to do. I can't do this anymore. And I wasn't even thinking about the consequences of what I was choosing to do. All I knew was I was in a situation that I didn't want to be in anymore.
Yeah. And that's fair.
So I told my parents at first, like they were both like, oh, okay, well, if you're not happy, then it's okay. And my mom, it took her a long time to really like wrap her head around what was happening. Cause I think I said the words, but she was just like, okay. And then when she started seeing what was happening, she was like, whoa, you're not gonna be with him anymore? Like, well, why? And I had to like explain to her like, well, you know, we've had a lot of problems over the last few years and I just can't deal with it anymore. She was okay with that. Like, I think she understood that, like, okay, my daughter's not happy. Like, I guess that's okay. So her and my dad like moved all my stuff out of our apartment, and then I ended up going back to their house. And then I think it took them a really long time to really digest what was happening. Like, I think they saw it and they're like, okay, I guess this is happening. And then as it started to sink in, they're like, wait, you're divorced. Wait, you're divorced. That's not okay. And they like start short circuiting, like, oh my God, she's divorced. And they like start breaking down. My cousin was getting married in like about 3 months after I had moved home in Singapore. And this is my cousin, like, you know, we're super close in age. Like we were super close growing up. Both my parents were like, you can't go.
Was it because of everyone is going to talk about it and it's going to be like a whole situation?
Yeah.
The judgment passed.
Yep. They were like, well, we don't want to have to explain to everybody that you guys are, you know, not together. So, you know, just, you can't go. I was like, okay, I can't go. All right, great. Thanks for making me feel even better about my choice. Because at the point, like when I left, like I didn't want to leave. Like I wanted to stay with him, like at that point, but I was just so in a corner. It was like, it's him or me, and I had to make the choice. I didn't want to make it, but I had to. I was like, for my own survival and for my own happiness. I mean, I'm 30. I deserve to live a life where I can be happy. It's crazy. That weekend of my cousin's wedding was Halloween weekend, and I went out with a bunch of friends. And at that point, like, I thought that I was okay. I was like, I think I'm doing all right, because I was telling myself that I had made the right decision for myself. So I was really holding on to that. I ended up getting super drunk that night. I drove home and I got a DUI.
Wow.
So it was nuts, because I gave my ex like so much shit for like being a drunk, and like I'm following in his footsteps. Like I'm doing the exact same thing. That was kind of my bottom at that point. It had only been about 4 months, but I realized that, if I left him to be happier, then I need to honor that, and I need to make myself happier. So I started like, kind of getting back on my feet. I started working out a lot, and that kind of made me feel better. But my parents were still pretty upset about my choice. And it wasn't so much the fact that I was unhappy with a person. It was that their eldest daughter is now divorced, and she is going to be seen a certain way in our culture. Like, she's just going to be seen as a divorcee from now on. She has to live with that title, like, across her forehead. And then like, I have 2 younger sisters, and I was always kind of the like problem child in the family. Like I just kind of do like what I want to do. Right. And my siblings, like they've always done exactly what my parents have wanted them to do. Like they've followed all the rules. So then they see me now like make the most epic mistake like you can make as a South Asian kid. And they were starting to give me a hard time about it too. They were like, you're really, upsetting our parents, and I'm worried about them. And you're, they've called me every name. At least one of my sisters called me every name in the book, and, hasn't been happy with me. So I would say like that was worse.
Yeah,
like,
I'm sure
the aftermath and that's what makes me emotional, because not only did I like lose the person that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, I also lost my family. And I just felt so like alone.
Yeah. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, because that's the one set of people who you need in your corner during a time like this. And it just upsets me so much to think like what's more important is, the judgment that we're going to face versus the happiness of my child or my sibling. It's not acceptable. It's not the way it should be. I'm here for you. And I'm sure, I know it's been some time now, but I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Losing your family over a choice that is about your own happiness is nothing someone should ever have to go through, because your happiness should be the highest priority for your whole family. You know what I mean? So
totally.
It is interesting that that is the number one concern when it comes to divorce in South Asian communities. What is everyone else going to say? And the label that you're going to have to carry. And it's like, well, why does there have to be a label? Why does it matter? As long as I'm happy and living my life.
Mm-hmm. So, I can tell you this right now, like while I was still married, had I known that I was going to be losing my family in the process, I don't think I would have done it.
Wow.
Like, I think if I had known that decision, like you're going to lose your parents, you're going to lose your sibling, you're not going to have relationships with them. Like, I think I would have thought twice before doing it.
So your parents and siblings are still out of your life, or have they come around to it now?
They've come around to it now. Now I'm happy in a new relationship. I have a whole new career. They're finally realizing like, oh, okay, like she like is okay. Like, I guess like that whole divorce thing didn't ruin her life. Like she's okay. So like they're now like 4 years later, like finally realizing that I'm not a total piece of I had to go through all of that with them. Yeah. And it's like, I would say like I'm a pretty emotionally strong person. And after everything that I went through, I would feel really sad for anyone else to have to go through that, because it was very rough. My worst case scenario was, okay, like I own a condo. I could always cash out my condo and then just leave the country. But I also like, I'm just so Indian sometimes, and like my family, like I can't turn my back on my family. Like I just can't, is like as much as they like hurt me, like I just can't, like there's just something that I can't break. Some people are like they could, but I don't know.
Did you have to hear anything from your extended family, from the general community when you finally took the step and when they found out about it?
Nobody said anything to my face.
Okay.
My mom told me that people would call her and just kind of ask like, well, what happened? And they'd like, be all up in the biz. And I think for her, she really, really didn't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm like her firstborn child, so like she's obviously never gone through having a divorced child before. So I think her already being traditional Indian where she cares what people think and then having to deal with that, where all my aunts are asking questions, all my cousins, and we have a huge family, obviously. So everyone going to her and asking her like, well, what's going on? What's going on? She was like, whoa, 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 not answering the phone. Can't deal with these people anymore. So I think like there was that stress that she was dealing with. My dad is divorced too, to be honest. Like he came to the States in like the 70s. He got married, didn't work out. And so he has a divorce. So he like didn't really say much. I think for him, he was more like, what's she going to do with her life now that she's not married? And like, what's she going to do? Like, I just want to know like what her next step is. But going back to your question, I didn't get a ton from extended family because they all kind of went through my mom. I didn't anticipate how it was going to affect my relationships with my siblings.
Right. Yeah.
Because I was always the black sheep. Like I was always doing things a little bit differently. They're both doctors. Like I'm the only like non-doctor in the family. So I think they've always seen me as kind of like, she just can't follow the rules, So just kind of almost this, like they wouldn't look up to me, if that makes sense. Like they would just look at me as, like she's kind of the screw up of the family. Don't do what she's doing. So I think they felt like, why can't you just follow the rules like us? We follow the rules. Our parents are happy. By you breaking all the rules, you're screwing up this family. So the blame was all on me that I was the reason for my parents' stress and why nobody talks and all that. So I got a lot of blame for our family dynamics.
That's very unfair to place that on you because everyone is different and some people are okay with living their life following a set of rules and some people aren't. I was never okay with following rules myself. There are so many people who are like down with following the rules and it's very hard for them to understand the mindset of a person who's like, well, these rules, I just don't think they apply to me and my life and my circumstances.
Yeah. One thing I also wanted to comment on was, I was telling my boyfriend a little bit earlier, I don't know if I would have said this 4 years ago when I was initially getting divorced, but him being an alcoholic, like I saw all the red flags. Like those red flags were all there. Like I totally could have pulled the plug early and been like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to marry this guy because reasons A, B, and C. But I think for me at that time, because I was 28 years old.
Yeah.
So I was kind of at that age, like within our culture where it's like, okay, I should be getting married at that time. That's when society would expect me to get married. So the timing was good. I had a good job. He was charismatic, fun, like handsome, came from, good family. He had a good job. Honestly, like that checklist was more important than my own happiness. I would have to say at that point. Because I introduced him to my parents. My parents both loved him. I mean, I was like, well, he checks off everything on the list. And it's just this one thing where we kind of like don't really agree up with, well, we'll figure it out. We love each other. We'll figure it out. So I kept thinking that wasn't a deal breaker and that we would figure it out because everything else was so important. But it's crazy. Now I look back on that and I'm like, I had it so backwards. It was all that stuff that was not as important as that one area that I thought was the least important. And I don't know, maybe that's what life was teaching me, that, you gotta prioritize like what's important and what's not. Because when I was 28, I definitely had my priorities all out of whack.
Most of us, I feel like, did.
I would say I learned so much out of this whole experience of being divorced than I have of any other experience that I've had in my life.
I'm sure that's a lot to deal with in your 20s. Like you're just getting to know yourself. And before that, you're like, I don't even know where you are.
Yeah, exactly. He got married when he was 25, I think. And that marriage was only a year.
Okay.
And that was another red flag because when we were catching up, like kind of before we started dating, he told me that so that was arranged. That was an arranged marriage. He told me that she was a gold digger and she just married him for his money and she didn't love him and all that stuff. And I was like, all right. Like I believed him because he was my friend. And if he's telling me that that's how this chick did him, then I'm going to believe him, But as time went on, I was like, maybe she wasn't totally wrong about you.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that his family was kind of enabling of this behavior.
Yeah.
Instead of getting him the help that he needed. And I really do hope that South Asians really start taking these problems more seriously because anything that's psychological, as we talked about, is a problem. And alcoholism isn't a thing to them. And that's where we're wrong because there's so many women in marriages who suffer the brunt of that mindset, right? Because it's affecting their personality and it changes who they are. Because some people they can't take the alcohol and that's just what it is. It is something that I hope we see change. Rehab isn't a bad thing and therapy isn't a bad thing. These are tools to make you your best self and live your best life.
Yeah, and I love that you're using your platform to highlight some of these issues because they Like it's true. Like there's just some things that South Asians are like, nope, not looking at that, not looking at that. Like I see more like celebrities and I see people like being more open to talking about it now than they were before. But I can only imagine like how many people are either in relationships or maybe they're divorced or single that go through so much but don't feel like they can talk about it.
Yeah.
Because well, like my parents won't be okay with it or my friends won't, my family, whatever. They
Mhm.
just feel like they have to suffer in silence. And I think that's a huge, like that's what sends people into being unhealthy mentally, you know what I mean?
Totally. You need to have people to talk to, whether it is a professional or even the support of your family. It
Mhm.
should be a thing where you can't speak to someone who is supposed to be a person who cares for you. These are doors that should be open
Yeah.
always. It shouldn't be a thing where it's like, well, we can't talk about that. Like live your life by the prescribed rules. And all
Right.
that stuff, it just doesn't exist because it does exist.
And that's what's cool about the media, like social media and everything. People do have a platform to voice what they're going through today. Whereas maybe 5, 10 years ago, you know, that was never, ever
Mhm.
possible for you to even have an outlet where you can go and talk openly and freely and not be totally slammed and judged for it.
Yeah.
Every piece of divorce content that I've posted on TikTok, on Instagram, I've gotten nothing but love on it. I remember when I like initially, like, cause I was running my social media platform back when I was getting divorced too, but I just did not have the guts to like talk about it. Well, first I didn't know how to talk about it.
Right.
I did, cause I didn't want to talk about him, but I do want to talk about my experience and
Yeah.
how my experience could maybe help somebody that's going through the same thing, just because it's so lonely, especially when you think that you're the only one that's dealing with it. You're the only one that's hurting your family and hurting this person. But when you put like the content that I've been putting out, like I've uncovered a whole nother community of people that want to be heard, that want to be seen, you know, like on TikTok, it's insane the number of comments I get where people are like, I'm going through the same thing. Hopefully I'll be happy too.
And you will be happy. You definitely will be happy. That's what
Yeah.
it comes down to. Do you have advice for those people who are going through this? And what's your advice on moving forward?
My biggest piece of advice would be to push right through it, because you've made the first most difficult decision for your happiness, and that was that decision to leave, to get divorced. You know, that's the first step to finding your happiness, and to just keep pushing along and find your support system. It may be your family, it may not be your family, but find your support system, because you're going to need them. 7 billion people in the world. I mean, there's definitely going to be at least one person who would understand like what you're going through, you know.
You're not alone.
That you're not alone. You are supported, you're loved.
And do you have any advice for those who may be in a marriage that's really too much for them and they are looking to get a divorce, but they don't know how to take those steps?
I would say do your research first and really understand the process and what you're going to be going through. If you're someone who like really like just doesn't know what to do or can do your own research, then I would hire an attorney. Make sure that it's what you really want.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to start going through the process and then halfway through it, it's like, oh, well, maybe we could make it work. You need to be pretty sure that that's what you want to do and understand everything that comes with it. You know, like understanding that my parents may or may not be supportive, my friends may or may not be supportive, and the real ones will be there, but I'm probably going to lose some people in the process. Things are going to change dramatically.
Be prepared, but find your happiness, right? That's what matters here.
Yeah, know that your North Star is your happiness. One other thing I did want to mention is, so when I was going through my divorce initially and I was trying to figure out how to get back on my feet, I did briefly mention that fitness was something that like helped. It really, really did. Like there were times where I would be so depressed, like I would literally smoke a bowl and I would just like pass out and I would like have a show going on in the back. I didn't even know what time of the day it was. It was like, it felt like the Twilight Zone. After my DUI, that's when I realized I needed to figure out what to do. So I started running. I started going to my high school's track and I started running around the track. And that was the only time that I started feeling normal. I was like, oh, I actually feel good after this, because I was sweating, I was out of breath. Like I felt good. So I literally got addicted to that feeling of feeling good. So I would say like anyone who's going through it, I mean, like find something that will make you feel good. And I would say like to anyone who's making that choice to get divorced, you're doing it for your own happiness, and to like really hold on to that. And that's your why, you know, is for my happiness. It's for my happiness. And I think like holding on to that as part of your why, I think is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much
Of
I,
course. Thank you, Swasti.
I so appreciate it, Christina. This was such an insightful conversation, and I really appreciate you being so open and just even talking. It's very hard to talk about family issues. That is not something that we are primed to do. That's
Yeah.
something you typically keep to yourself. And
Mhm.
I'm sure there's going to be people who relate to it and have experienced it, especially through this process, or are worried and apprehensive about experiencing that.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's for you. I know you made the statement that maybe you wouldn't have done it, but your family's coming around. So I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you know. I'm really proud of you for what you did.
Thank you. That means a lot to hear you say that. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And thank you again for having me and talking it out with me. And yeah, I mean, I hope that this can help, even if it's just one person who's maybe going through this or maybe thinking about going through it. I hope that it could empower and make someone feel better about the choice that they're making for themselves.